glad to hear your comments about the deficit and balanced budget amendment. The last time I heard balanced budget was 1994, Newt Gingrich. And I'll go back a little bit in history. In 2001, we had a president who was a Republican and a Congress who was a Republican. That president inherited a budget that showed a $200 billion surplus and a projected surplus of over $5 trillion over the next decade. 8 years later, federal expense had grown by 90%. The deficit had more than doubled from 5.8 to almost $12 trillion. Why should I believe any Republican today who's talking about cutting expenses and balanced budget amendment?
You shouldn't. Let me explain what I mean by that. You shouldn't trust anyone just because they say they're a Republican or just because they say they're a Democrat. This is an equal opportunity problem. This is a bipartisan problem if I've ever seen one. This problem traces its roots back to Republicans perhaps every bit as much as it does Democrats. Republicans have been guilty and so has Democrats. That's why I say it's neither liberal nor conservative, it's simply American. Now, here's the issue. You notice then, you're right, George Bush inherited some pretty good times when he started out. And we turned it into a big, huge mess. We expanded the size and the scope and the cost of the federal government, and that's a tragedy. I wish he hadn't done that, and I wish our then Republican controlled Congress hadn't done that. But let me tell you how we can make it different this time. What they didn't do then, sure they talked about balancing a budget, but they didn't do anything to force themselves to do it. They didn't eliminate or restrict on a permanent basis Congress's institutional pathological habit of perpetual deficit spending. That's what we have to do now, and we have to change the Constitution to do it. The reason for that is, when members of Congress promise that they'll make cuts in the future, it's a little bit like St. Augustine. When he was undergoing his conversion to Christianity hundreds of years ago, he said, "Lord, grant me chastity, but not yet." We don't want to do it now, because it's hard now. We want to do it later. And for Congress, that's really convenient, because Congress changes its composition every 2 years. So when we promise $1 trillion in cuts over 10 years, don't believe us, because that's a bold-faced lie. Because we can't cut $1 trillion during a 2-year increment. That has to be stretched over 10 years. The Congress in power now is not the same Congress that will be in power starting in January 2013, or 2015, or 2017, or 2019. It changes. The only way you bind one Congress to the next is through a constitutional amendment. That one is one where we have to get both Republicans and Democrats behind the same issue. And that's what we're doing, that's what we've got, and that's how we're going to fix it.